Hi there, it's Jenna from scribblinggrace.com. So last time I showed you how to paint this page and these acrylic feathers. And today I'm going to show you how to paint watercolor feathers. The thing is that there's so many different ways that you can paint feathers. And so I showed you this technique using acrylics, but you can do the same exact technique using watercolor. And here's an example of that. Basically, you just take your paintbrush and do little swipes out from a little twig in the center. The one thing that you would change if you wanted to use watercolor is you would just pick up different colors as you go through. So I just used kind of a maroon color, a purple, and a brown to do this feather here. And it's very similar to the acrylic feather page. So I didn't think I needed to do a full tutorial on how to paint the feather this way with watercolor. So I would encourage you to go and check out the acrylic feather tutorial. I'll link it in the description below. And then if you still feel like you want me to do the watercolor feather using this technique, definitely let me know in the comments below. But I thought that today I would go ahead and paint some even simpler feathers. So though this is kind of somewhat more realistic type of feather, I'm going to paint some watercolor feathers here using these little clip art images that I did on my iPad. And I have this little printout linked in my blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor-feathers. And you can just head on over there and download this little printable for free if you'd like. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I am using my Interlude Bible here, which has the full blank pages. So I'm going to be using all three of these feathers. I'm going to change up the design a little bit from what it is on the printable page, but you'll see. And so I'm just cutting off the one side of my page so I can get that right side feather positioned where I want it to be. And these feathers are about 2 inches wide, so if you only have a normal 2-inch margin journaling Bible, you can still paint one of these feathers in that margin without covering up the scripture. So that's fun. And of course, you could also use the printable as a coloring page. You can do something like this on a separate sheet of paper, on scrap paper, in a sketchbook. Do whatever you want to do with it and have fun. So I'm going ahead and I'm just picking out some colors from my Kirtake Gansai Tambu watercolor set. I'm going to do some warmer tones, so I picked out some pink colors, kind of a copper color, and a yellow. And we're going to be doing the wet on wet technique here. So I don't usually do the wet on wet technique in my journaling Bible because watercolors just react so differently on the paper of a journaling Bible than they do on watercolor paper. So wet on wet technique, you kind of need that grittiness, the texture of the watercolor paper, which you don't have since the journaling Bible's paper is so smooth and so thin. You kind of end up getting pools and things like that. It's a little bit tricky to do. But it's a fun thing to try out, and it still creates a really cool effect in the journaling Bible. So again, this is just another way that you can paint these feathers, but you could definitely just do this kind of wet on wet or wet on dry, where you just paint directly on the wow, where you paint with the wet watercolor directly on the dry paper. But you can also use colored pencils or markers, whatever supply you want to use. I also did not prep my page. I find that watercolors just react even weirder on prepped pages, and they can bleed through more than they do on an unprepared page. So I did not prep my page. So key things with the wet on wet technique. Basically, I just take a clean paintbrush and water, and I painted over that outline on the one side of my feather. Then you have to work kind of quickly, and you pick up paint, and then you start just kind of dabbing it into where that water was. So the colors will kind of flow together and blend together. It's pretty darn simple once you get the hang of it. But I'm basically just going to go in and just keep on adding layers of color into that wet mixture while it's still wet. And I want those colors to kind of bleed together and create a really cool effect. you'll see one of the other main aspects of this is you're gonna need a paper towel. So when there's little pools where it's pooling too much, I'll just dab that up with a paper towel. But I want to make sure that I'm still getting that color on the page, so I don't want to dab it up too much, but just getting rid of those little pools helps. And then I'm just going to do the other side of my feather the same way. So again, I just took my clean brush and painting in that outline. I didn't use a pencil or anything to outline this. I'm just using that traceable as my guide underneath the page. Since the page is so thin, you can see that traceable pretty easily. Another big tip that I have for this wet on wet technique is to choose your colors wisely. So don't choose colors like a red and green, because once those colors merge together, you're going to get brown. You want to choose colors like yellows and reds, which would just create an orange when blended, or you could do blue and green or blue and yellow. You want to just make sure that your colors will look good once they smudge together, you know. So just choose your colors wisely. If you're not working fast enough with this technique, I find that watercolors do dry faster on the Bible page than they do on normal watercolor paper. So you need to work pretty quickly with this technique, but you can always just add some more water where you need. You can also work in multiple layers. If you're not loving how the colors blended the first time, you can just kind of go over it again and add in more color where you want it to go. You'll also see that my page is crinkling a little bit, so I'll just kind of pull my page up and kind of pull it to the side, lift it up a little bit, let those colors blend even more together. I didn't really have any plan with where I was going to put my colors as I went. You can just keep on adding color till it looks how you want it to look. You can even add those lighter colors into that darker color and it'll lighten it up. You can dab up some of that darker color if it's too dark. Just have fun with it and let it go where it wants to go. Don't stress too much about pools. Once it's dry, it'll still look pretty darn neat. I would also say that probably one of the biggest questions I'll have about this is how much water to use. I would say don't be afraid of using water. Don't be afraid of getting those pools, but also don't use so much water that you're totally flooding your page. You want to make sure that you're able to keep that water somewhat contained as well. I think it just kind of takes some practice and just, you know, go with it and have fun. I think that's one of my biggest things. Just get the paint on the page and have fun with it. It doesn't need to be perfect. One of the beauties of watercolor is that pretty much any way that you use it, it's still going to look really darn cool. So while my colors are still wet, I'm just taking that copper color and I just swiped up to create that little stem and that feather. And then I'm going to go ahead and dry it. So I'm using my craft heat gun to dry my feather here. You could technically use a hair dryer. The thing about this technique specifically, these really wet watercolors, using a blow dryer can definitely make the blow the air so hard that the watercolors will end up going off of that feather that you have. It'll kind of spray over the page. Even with my heat gun, which blows very little air, I was getting quite a lot of movement within those puddles of watercolor. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't have a heat gun, though, I will say that I love my heat gun and I use it in every single one of my Bible journaling pages. It's definitely my most used supply for Bible journaling, and it's only about 20 bucks. I'm totally talking it up now, but I have links to all the supplies I'm using in the blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor-feathers. But anyways, if you don't have a heat gun, you could definitely just let it air dry as well. I would probably say air dry over using a blow dryer. You just gotta have patience if you don't have a heat gun. So I decided that I want the stem of my feather to stand out a little bit more, so I just used a little bit more of that copper color over the dry feather to make that stand out a little bit. And that's that for that feather. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up this video and show you how I did the last two feathers pretty darn quickly. I used the same exact wet on wet technique, the same exact method. The middle feather I just added in a little bit more purple. I also cut up my printable, so I rearranged some of the feathers, and I took one upside down and put that in the middle. And then the other feather on the left side I wanted to be switched around, going the opposite way as it was on the printable. So I just flipped that printable over and used a brush pen to outline the back side of that feather so that it was flipped the direction I wanted it, and I could still see it once I traced it onto my Bible page, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's pretty simple way of painting these feathers. It might take a little bit of practice if you have not tried the wet on wet technique in your journaling Bible before. It's a little bit tricky to get a hang of, but it's totally doable. And if, again, just have fun with it and do your own thing, do whatever you want to do. You can change up colors, you can, you know, just enjoy. And enjoy the time spent in the Word and with God and worshiping Him. So then I felt like it needed a little something extra to finish off the painting portion of this page, and so I just took a flat 1/2-inch paintbrush, I believe, and dipped it in the watercolor and flicked it onto the page, all over the page. And I felt like that was kind of the finishing touch that it needed. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some lettering. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I love to do brush calligraphy and script lettering and stuff, but I thought that I would change it up today and do this like funky all capital type of font. So I just varied up the length of each of my letters. So some of them are longer than others, and it makes it look really funky and pretty cool, I thought. So I wrote out my verse that I'm working on, which is Deuteronomy 32, verse 10 through 11, which says, "He found him in a desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness. He encircled him, he cared for him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions." And that's the ESV version, which is the version that this Bible is. But I decided to write out the NIV version because I like to have those multiple different versions on my page if I can. So anyways, I just used a Micron size 04 pen to do my lettering, and that was that. That's the end of my page. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Remember that you can head on over to the blog post at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor feathers, and I'll link that in the description below. And you can get the little free printable and also find all of the links to all the supplies that I use for this page. So I hope that you give it a shot. If you do, be sure to tag me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll put those links just at Scribbling Grace. So, all right. Hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.